All right, we are back here getting ready for Super Bowl 57 on Sunday between the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles. A fantastic matchup. Joining me today to break it all down, the pro football guru himself on Twitter, Russell Baxter, is here. Russell, how are you?
I'm doing good, Mike. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I'm very excited to get to Sunday and watch this game. I was very pumped when this matchup happened here. Probably think the most exciting matchup of the four with options we had entering Championship Sunday. What do you think about this game?
Well, you obviously have some history here with Andy Reid. One of my favorite little early nuggets is that when Andy Reid was head coach of the Eagles, he was 3-0 against the Chiefs. Andy Reid, as the Chiefs head coach, is now 3-0 against the Eagles. So take that for what you're worth. It obviously dates back to 1999. And Andy, who people sometimes forget, is actually the longest tenured head coach in the league. Bill Belichick is the longest tenured head coach with one team since 2000, but Andy's been a head coach since 1999. He's won at least 10 playoff games with two different franchises. I think he's fifth all time in wins now, overall wins. He's built himself quite a resume. But the Eagles are back here for the second time in 6 years. I know Kansas City's back here for the third time in 4 years. But the Eagles team that we're seeing this year is eerily reminiscent of the Eagles team we saw in 2017. And I mean that in the sense that the strength of this team is the offensive and defensive lines. That's what paved the way for the Super Bowl 52 win over New England. And it's why I'm sure a lot of people, and I think they're favored, to win this game a week from Sunday.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Let's dive into some of these specific angles here. I'll start with Andy Reid, obviously, because obviously this is, most people would say it's kind of a revenge angle, but it's a little weird revenge angle in the sense that both the Chiefs and Andy Reid have won Super Bowl since, Andy Reid and the Eagles have won the Super Bowl since he departed here. So what do you think, is the angle here? I think that's, you're going to watch for with the Andy Reid thing. I feel it's going to be fascinating to see, how he interacts with the situation, because obviously second title here really just supercharged the Hall of Fame resume for him.
Well, if not already, okay. Keep something in mind, okay. This will be Andy Reid's fourth Super Bowl appearance. The third with the Chiefs. He took the Eagles to the Super Bowl 39. Bud Grant, Marv Levy, both in the Hall of Fame, correct?
Yes.
Both 0-4 in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not so much the winning it. Now, I'm not saying if you went 0-9 in the Super Bowl, but you might be. It's the development of players, what he's done with Kansas. Andy Reid's been in Kansas City 10 years, 9 playoff appearances, and a 9-7 season. He's not had a losing season. So I think more of the storyline is less about Andy Reid, per se, and more about what Howie Roseman has done in Philadelphia. Overhauled the team from a Super Bowl team from a couple of years ago. Now there's still a lot of pieces there: Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, but key people like Zach Ertz is not there anymore. Jason Peters, who missed that Super Bowl 52 because he was hurt. A lot of those veteran guys. He made some tough decisions, letting Doug Peterson go, and obviously Doug Peterson's a playoff coach this year with Jacksonville. So I think as much as anything, Howie Roseman might be, we don't often talk general managers unless they're a Hall of Fame general manager. And maybe Howie's carving his own niche. But if you don't want to talk about the quarterbacks, and sometimes people don't want to just talk about the quarterbacks, although some people only talk about the quarterbacks, it's a topic for another time. I think you have to look at what the Chiefs have done. 5 straight AFC Championship game appearances. And what the Eagles have, it's funny because they've done it with different head coaches, but the Eagles have been in the playoffs 5 of the last 6 years. They've done it with different coaches, and they've done it with different quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's very interesting here. And you mentioned the quarterback. I do want to go there briefly here because obviously this match between Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts is a lot of fun here. Obviously historic because the first matchup with 2 black quarterbacks starting in the Super Bowl against each other here. So what about the matchup intrigues you with the quarterbacks?
Well, these teams played last year in Philadelphia, and Mahomes had a big day, but the Eagles wouldn't go away. And they wound up in the playoffs last year. I think the score is 42-30, so there was plenty of scoring. The game was was in Philadelphia. I look at what Mahomes did last week on the bad leg and undermanned in terms of his receivers, and they don't have much of a running game. But I look at what Philadelphia has done in 2 playoff games, and if people can say what they want about the 49ers losing their quarterbacks, they lost their quarterbacks because it's a physical Eagles defense. The Eagles have won 2 playoff games, 69-14. Okay? The last couple of years, we've seen a lot of close playoff games. The Eagles not involved in any close playoff game this year. And again, you look at their offensive and defensive lines. Their offensive line, probably the best in the league. Defensive line, they had to recruit a couple people like Ndamukong Suh in the middle of the season when injuries hit, but deep in both aspects. They run the ball. They're more balanced than the Chiefs. And they'll present a lot of problems for the Kansas City defense, which is, safe to say, kind of middle of the road. But in Philadelphia, has to be careful with the turnovers because they have been a little turnover prone. They were down the stretch and so on. But these games usually come down to the trenches. What's interesting to me is that Patrick Mahomes will try to overcome something that's never happened and something that hasn't happened in a while. I'm going to tease you with that. Do you have any idea what that is?
I actually do not.
Okay, end of tease. No quarterback has ever led the league in passing yards and won the Super Bowl the same year.
That's pretty wild. You think about that.
Right. And do you have any idea the last time? And we don't know this yet. Okay? But it could be Jalen Hurts. Both of these guys could be in the same position. The MVP, which we will know next Thursday, I believe, is the honors show. League MVP won the Super Bowl the same year.
You got to go back, I think, at least like 15 years, I would think.
You have to go back more than that. You have to go back to Kurt Warner in 1999.
That's also a crazy stat.
And then, by the way, I'll throw this in. I'm writing a piece about this, so I might as well, just shoot the whole works here. Travis Kelce will also try to do something. Travis Kelce, by the way, who has 127 receptions in playoff games. That's the second most in NFL history behind Jerry Rice. But he could also do something, and I'm not saying Dallas Goedert couldn't do it either. No tight end's ever been named.
Yeah, you never had a Super Bowl MVP as tight end. That could change this year.
Yes, it could. You could see a lot of changes. As time goes on, a lot of these little idiosyncrasies and these trends and tendencies that kind of bite the dust. The passing yards one is fascinating to me because we're not talking about 20 years. We're talking about 56.
Yeah, that's for sure here. I want to go because we've got some position angles I feel like are interesting here. Because obviously the Eagles, we talked about it a little bit here. Their running game is the best in the league. They have used the power running game. They use a bunch of different backs. They have Jalen Hurts involved in the rushing attack. What makes this running game so successful for Philly?
Well, it's the line.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, they've got a potential Hall of Fame center in Jason Kelce. Okay? They made moves. Had to tweak some stuff. From the unit from a couple of years ago, but Landon Dickerson they wound up getting. Howie Roseman has put a priority, and I think some of that stems from Andy Reid because Andy Reid was always a trench guy as well. Inevitably, if you're going to win a championship, that's where you have to be tightened up. Okay, if the quarterbacks don't think about this. Tom Brady threw for 505 yards in the Super Bowl and lost. Lost to the Eagles, as a matter of fact. So, and the reason in the game, I know Nick Foles and Philly Special and all that were two different things that involved the offensive and defensive line. First, they ran for 164 yards on Bill Belichick's defense in Super Bowl 52. And they did it with backfield by Jay Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount and Corey Clement, but they blew the Patriots' defensive line off the ball. Now, go back to the fourth quarter. I know you'll remember this. A deep Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator, deep on the defensive line. Not a lot of sacks in that game, if you will remember. One big one, though, late in the fourth quarter. Strip sack of Brady. Eagles get the ball. Their depth on the defensive line was what clinched that Super Bowl title. And that's the area where they have a big edge, I think. I mean, Chris Jones is a magnificent player. He'll get some votes for Defensive Player of the Year. Might even win it. You never know. But that deep trench game for the Eagles is what makes them, I think, the better team in this matchup.
Absolutely here. I also want to give the Chiefs credit here for basically reinventing their entire receiving core in a year after they trade Tyreek Hill last year, and a couple of guys walking free agency, bringing a couple of free agents, a draft pick here. How did the Chiefs manage to do this and basically turn the entire receiving group over and still have a very productive passing offense?
Well, I mean, listen, they had a lousy season. They were, 4-11-1, and they drafted high, and they got Devontae Smith. And then Howie Roseman, I wrote about this over the summer. You see this a lot of time by our media. And 9 times out of 10, people pick the team that signed the most players and acquired the most players. And you and I know that doesn't work. Philly did very little in the offseason as far as player acquisitions. But look what they did. They got Hassan Reddick, who has 16 sacks this year, and he's been a dynamo since he discovered he could rush the passer and didn't have to play inside linebacker his first 3 seasons with the Cardinals. Okay? They traded for A.J. Brown. Okay, who Tennessee was looking to get rid of because I think they were afraid they were going to have to pay him. Okay, look at the difference he's made. And again, kudos to Howie Roseman. They're going to wind, if they win the Super Bowl, they're going to have the 31st pick in the first round. Remember, Miami forfeited their pick. Okay, so there's only 31 first-round picks. If they lose the Super Bowl, they'll have a 30th pick. But do you know what else pick they have? They have the 10th overall pick, Mike, from a trade that they did with the Saints last April. Okay? And the Saints obviously had a poor season, 7-10. So Philadelphia, win or lose, is going to have a top 10 draft pick a year after going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts here. Let's shift gears to the Chiefs for a second here, because obviously we talk about the Philly receiving core here. Chief receiving core obviously has gone overhauled as well here. How much credit do you give to Andy Reid, Mahomes' company, for managing to basically flip the entire receiver and still have a very productive passing offense?
Well, listen, if anybody doubted what Tyreek Hill was and thought he was maybe a product of Patrick Mahomes, look what he did in Miami. That aside, you look at what Andy Reid was able to configure by getting guys like Jerick McKinnon and Isaiah Pacheco, the rookie, involving everybody in the passing game. Last week they were down to, bare bones and got plays from their young receivers, and they got, the big punt return from Sky Moore and so on. So it just goes to show you that in this day and age, you can have some listen, you have superstars like Hill and Justin Jefferson and Devontae Adams. But because the passing game is so prevalent in college football, much more than it was 10, 15 years ago, you can get guys who come in and step in, maybe a little fed, just like the quarterbacks might come in and step in and adapt to the pro game a lot faster than they used to. The receivers do that as well. And like I said, they got some big plays. And of course, they do have Travis Kelce, okay, who opens up a lot of things for a lot of offensive players. And the rapport between him and Mahomes is something very, very special. Both those guys are, Patrick's been the league since 2017. He's only been the starter 5 years. Travis Kelce was a rookie the first year Andy Reid came to Kansas City. And if memory serves me, I'll probably hope I'm not butchering this. I think Travis Kelce caught 1 pass his rookie year. He got hurt or something like that. He barely played, and now look at him now. He's a perennial Pro Bowler and a pretty steady All-Pro as well.
Yeah, that's for sure here. And obviously, the last time the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, they ended up losing because the offensive line let them down. And now they spend a lot of time retooling the offensive line. That's going to be more important here in this matchup because obviously the fierce Eagles pass with him, Mahomes playing with the injured ankle, which 2 weeks should help. But how good a chance you get this line do you think of standing up to Mahomes here and protecting against this pass rush?
Well, I won't be surprised if Andy Reid comes out here and tests the Philly run defense. I think listen. They had a bunch of sacks in the 2 playoff games. Mike, during the regular season, the Philadelphia Eagles in 17 games had 70 sacks. 70. Those are historic type. It's not the record, okay? The record is 72 by the 84 Bears in the 16-game season. Okay, the year before, by the way, the year before they won the Super Bowl, that wasn't the Super Bowl team. So, but they're mediocre against the run. Okay, and sometimes that aggressiveness works against them. So I wouldn't be shocked if Andy, and listen, Patrick Mahomes, and both him and Hurts should be a lot healthier with 2 weeks of rest and so on. But I wouldn't be shocked if Andy came out and tested this Philadelphia run defense a lot more than maybe people expect.
That's everything to see here, and obviously you got to go keys to victory for both teams. For the Eagles, the Chiefs, I would say, I feel like stopping the Philly run game has to be number one on my list. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. And if Philly had its way in the playoffs, I mean, Giants all 3 times they played them. Okay, and they were able to run against San Francisco last week. Jalen Hurts, you could tell that he was still laboring a little. He even came out and admitted that he wasn't 100%. So, but that's the beauty of Philadelphia. They can win a lot of different ways. It's very impressive to watch them be able. I know a number of people that after they lost their first game, some people were trying to compare them to the Cardinals from last year or the Steelers the year before. Nick Sirianni might have to adopt the John Madden. I don't know if you know the story of John Madden. John Madden used to wear a press credential on his pants because he was always afraid no one would let him into the game.
Yeah.
Okay. Nick Sirianni might want to, maybe he can put on a reporter's hat. Listen, he's done a hell of a job. Last year they were off to a terrible start. He gathered them. I think they learned from their playoff loss to Tampa Bay. They looked overwhelmed for 3 quarters. And this year they came out, again, really complete effort by the entire Eagles organization. But let's not forget, Patrick Mahomes does things that a lot of quarterbacks don't do and haven't done. And, I don't know if he's going to be a one-man show. But I just wouldn't be surprised with 2 weeks here if Andy Reid came out and tried to run the ball down the Eagles' throat.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, we'll go to Philly here for a minute here. What do you think the biggest key for them? Because obviously you could say, let's copy the Tampa game plan and just get Mahomes off, especially with the injured ankle. Or is it more important, take Kelsey out of the passing game and try and force the outside receivers to make more plays?
Well, that's going to be interesting because I'm going to be curious of how, what is Hassan Reddick going to have any coverage responsibilities? Are they going to have to bring up somebody from the secondary, maybe even a corner, to preoccupy Travis Kelsey? So what Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs proved this year was they could lose some key receivers and still be, hell, they were the highest scoring team in the league. Okay, with the number 1 offense. So they showed a lot of stuff, but they've also been very, very methodical during this playoff run. They did just what they had to do against Jacksonville. They got a key takeaway late in the game. They got a couple picks of Joe Burrow, opportunistic. That's one thing Philly can't afford to do. We have seen them when they have turned over the ball, okay, and it's been a disaster for them. Regardless of who was going, even when they barely beat the Bears because they couldn't hold on to the ball. So early in the year, I think during their 8-0 start, they had like 2 turnovers, and they wound up, I think, with 18 or 19. So the key is to take, and I can tell you historically, and you'll see some numbers I put out there, early next week and so on. The turnover differential number in the 56 turnovers would absolutely blow you away.
Yeah, that was definitely fun to see here. And the last question here is obviously when we start touchdown, like every time we do this here, like everybody's looking at the big matchups, like all the big players here. You always have a knack for finding that one under the radar player who have a big X factor for this game. Who is that guy for you this year?
Well, I think it could be, he had a good year and so on, it hurt for a little bit. I think it could be Dallas Goedert. With all the attention going on Travis Kelsey, it's not like a couple of years ago when San Francisco and Kansas City played and it was, there was a lot about Kelsey versus Kittle and so on. Again, tight end never been a Super Bowl MVP. Obviously the Chiefs are going to draw their attention towards Marcus Van Scouting, and who, by the way, couple of years ago, I had a 100-yard receiving game with the Packers in the playoffs. Had a 100-yard receiving game last week. He was huge for them last week. Maybe Dallas Goedert is the guy, who nibbles away. To me, if you're Philadelphia, you've got to be patient and not turn over the ball. If you're Kansas City, you've got to try to eliminate time from that clock. Okay, and again, test the Eagles' run defense. Jalen Hurts. It's only a difference of a couple years, but Patrick Mahomes is such a more seasoned quarterback, and certainly with a lot of playoff experience. Okay, but Patrick Mahomes. It's so funny. Patrick Mahomes. The only time he hasn't played a playoff game in Kansas City is the Super Bowl. He's never yet still played a road playoff game per se. So he's either played in Arrowhead Stadium or at a neutral site. But he's played in a lot of playoff games these past couple years. And I always like to watch the first quarter when it comes to guys who don't have a lot of Super Bowl experience. Okay? You'll see guys hopping up and down. You'll see guys you get noticeably nervous. It's a daunting thing to know that it all comes down to one game. Everybody's watching, a lot of pressure. That's why some of these first quarters in the Super Bowl are, less than scintillating. And by the time, settle down, we've seen some wild fourth quarters, I'd say, over the last 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, we'll see if we're in for a treat here. Russell, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. Before I let you go, people follow you on social media and keep up with some of your NFL coverage.
Well, on Twitter, I'm Bax Football Guru. On Facebook, it's Pro Football Guru. I also have a new page I started about 5 or 6 months ago called Football Past and Present Seriously. We do a lot of history on there, but we also keep you up to date with current events. We're getting near 1,000 likes and so on. So jump on there. And, we have a lot of historians who post on that page, some writers that I've known over the years as well. So, but like I said, follow me on Twitter, because if you don't, and you eventually do, I'll find you before you find me.
It sounds good, Russell. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
You got it.